Conversations with the innovators, leaders, and experts who are shaping the future of human resources through cutting-edge technology. Only on the Purple Acorn Network.
Welcome to From the Desk with Jada Montemarano, the podcast where we explore the intersection of technology, talent, and transformation in the world of HR. I'm your host, Jada, and every week I'll be sitting down with innovators, leaders, and experts who are shaping the future of human resources through cutting-edge technology. We'll discuss trends, hot topics, and dive into the tools and strategies that are helping organizations improve how they attract, retain, and support their most valuable asset, their people. So if you're into innovation, making smart hires, and finding the future of work before everyone else does, you're in the right place. Grab your coffee, hit play, and let's get into it. This is From the Desk with Jada Montemarano, where we bring you the hottest HR news from the desk right to you. And today's guest is a true pioneer in the world of HR and talent acquisition. Tim Sackett is the CEO of HRUtech.com, a leading technical recruitment firm, and he brings over 20 years of experience working with Fortune 500 companies. He's an international speaker, angel investor, and advisor to multiple HR companies. Tim is the author of the Talent Fix Volume 2 and writes on his blog, The Tim Sackett Project. With his deep expertise in HR and tech, Tim is here to share his insights on how talent acquisition is evolving, the future of HR tech, and much more. So let's dive right in. Thanks for joining us, Tim.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. So you have done so much in the HR space that we just spoke about. So let's start off with what your current overall goal is for the space.
I think a lot of it has to do with, if you think about traditionally technology, whether if you're an IT leader, if you're a finance leader, they all pick their own technology. HR has been one of those laggard, kind of professions that we're like, well, we'll just use whatever technology you give us. So for me, I guess a goal would always be, I want HR leaders and professionals to choose and pick their own technology. So to be aware enough of what's out there where they go, look, this is what we want, not, oh, thanks for giving us this. You guys have no idea what we need kind of thing.
Totally. And on that note, within your book, you always talk about the practical, actionable strategies for improving talent acquisition. So what's a major shift you're seeing right now in the recruitment world and how organizations and companies should plan for that?
AI, obviously we're always going to be talking about AI at some aspect over the last, year and probably into the future. One of the things that I think every HR team and TA team is facing is the increase in applications and it's not just the increase, because we have seen that, right? We hear from all these technology providers that on average, we see a double of the amount of candidates, right? And you could go, well, that could be from a bad economy and all this stuff. But the reality is the unemployment rate really hasn't changed that much. We're at about 4.2. It was probably as low as 3.7 at one point, early in the year, last year. So that it hasn't really changed. So they're like, wait a minute, how do you double the amount of applications? And that comes back to AI, candidates using AI where they can apply to 100 different jobs in a minute. But it's not just the number. They're also using AI to match with every job. And there's a lot of companies out there that, for candidates that go, hey, give us your resume, give us the job, and we'll write you an immediate, kind of resume that fits perfectly with that job. And that causes then, HR teams to have even more work because they're, wait a minute, I used to have 100 applicants. Now I have 200 applicants, and more than half of those applicants seem to match perfectly to the job. And that just becomes problematic, and it becomes more difficult to kind of plow through all of that.
And on that note, we're talking about the job market right now with all of those applicants applying. Is it making it harder for both the companies and the people that are applying to find those jobs? Because I know obviously all of this technology that you're working on is also helping, but do you think all of this with the AI that you're saying is also hurting some applicants?
Yeah, I was at a conference earlier a couple of weeks ago, and there was 100 CHROs, and it was the number one thing they said that was still a problem for them was finding really good talent. So they're like, look, we're getting more applications, but that's not making it easier for us. It's actually making it more difficult, more work, more time intensive. Partly because a lot of the HR teams haven't embraced the AI technology themselves, right? To use AI to combat kind of AI from the candidate side. I think it's ironic because candidates believe that companies, especially HR, is using way more AI than actually is being used right now. And so you hear candidates going, oh, well, the AI screened my resume out. More than likely it didn't. There's not a lot of HR teams out there that have embraced and using AI right now, because there's also a lot of risk there, from a legal standpoint, in terms of having AI kind of go out and select, and they're not sure exactly if they should do that from a bias standpoint and all these other things. So the number one issue is still finding great talent, and the AI isn't necessarily helping either side right now. And I think that's one of those things that we have to figure out.
So for the people who are saying, I'm applying, I'm applying, I'm applying, I'm not getting these jobs, and then you're saying on the company end, they're not able to really find those exact people that they are looking for. How do you see a solution? What is your solution to this, in your opinion?
I don't know if we found it. I think we're going to see companies use more AI to help in terms of matching, right? Candidates coming into job. Like what I said, if I have candidates that are using AI to fit perfectly, I'm just going to end up with more. I think what we're going to see as the AI allows HR and talent acquisition to be a little bit more free of like the tactical work, they're going to have to spend more time actually having real conversations with candidates, which I think candidates will actually like. I think companies will find better candidates by actually having more conversation and not less. And so we'll start to see, I think, a lot of that happening in the next kind of 12 to 24 months as kind of AI takes its foothold around the tactical work around TA and recruiting. It is interesting. I keep hearing from candidates too. They're like, well, it's this ghost job thing, right? And you see this on all like the mass media stuff, and they're like, no, it's a real thing. There's like these ghost jobs out there. They're fake jobs that companies are putting up. And I'm like, that's not real, right? Like it costs companies money to put up a job. Companies aren't paying real money to post a fake job. Now, they might post a job where they're hiring regularly, like an evergreen kind of role where they go, look, I might not have an opening this minute today, but I suspect I'm going to have an opening tomorrow, the next day, whatever that might be. Because we hire hundreds, thousands of these kinds of people every single year, but no one's putting fake jobs out there. Now, again, this also, like we hear from candidates are like, oh, well, there's scams out there and stuff like that. But most of those are like kind of LinkedIn messaging kinds of things where they go, oh, like someone messaged me about a job. They're not really like, oh, I applied to a job that's a complete scam. Every time somebody says that, I go, oh, cool, send me the link. I actually want to see it. And I've yet to get one link from a ghost job, even though every major news organization has done stories on ghost jobs,
So what do you think that is? Do you think it's just because there are so many applications, people aren't hearing back from jobs, so they think it's fake?
JD, I think that's one of the things, right? That's definitely one that we get ghosted by the company, so we think it's a fake job. The other thing I think that happens is you have in our world, like you have the big ones, right? You have Indeed and you have LinkedIn and some of the big like job boards like Career Builder or Dice or whatever. A lot of other like really small kind of job boards will scrape those job boards, kind of steal the traffic, right? So they will, oh, I'm going to steal a job off of LinkedIn. I'm going to scrape it. I'm going to put it on my job site so that I hope a candidate finds it. The problem is that small job site might never take that job down, even though the job is off of LinkedIn and the job was already filled. So again, the candidate thinks, oh, this is a fake job. It's not a fake job. It was a real job that somebody scraped and now it's not, and now it's already filled kind of thing, right? So you're never going to hear back. So there's some of that going on. There's things that happen where somebody posts a job and the company goes, hey, we have to post a job. It's part of our process. But I already know I'm going to hire Jada. I already know I have an internal candidate that I'm going to hire, but we still have to post it for 2 weeks. So again, candidates apply and they don't hear anything. And all of a sudden the job is closed and they're just like, oh, that was a fake job. That was a ghost job. There's a reason every single one of these jobs gets posted. And there's a reason why they get closed. And, and sometimes, they have an internal candidate. Sometimes the job changes. Sometimes the budget gets cut. Like, I go back to no one is paying real money to post fake jobs. Like there's no benefit to anybody for that.
I think that's helpful because I think a lot of people in the job market are struggling right now to get jobs. It does feel very oversaturated. It does feel daunting. A lot of people are getting frustrated and upset out there. So I guess, are you seeing from your end companies are actually hiring, or everybody else just thinks no one's hiring right now? Are they?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I think the number of open jobs has decreased probably by half from what its peak was, right? And at the peak of it, it was like, oh, there's 2 posted jobs for every single person, right? even though we still had companies still struggling to find people because there's a mismatch of skills and then the actual open jobs. And now that you have like half of those jobs, it feels even worse for people. Historically, though, it's still pretty low. We came out of this period after COVID that every company was hiring, and they basically would hire anybody. Like if you just showed up, they were going to hire you, right? And they were going to love you, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, you're the best thing ever." And now companies are like, "Oh, wait a minute, like economy's slowing down a little bit. Like we don't need as many people. We probably overhired, so you see layoffs happening." But it's not that necessarily the economy is really that weak, or that, the unemployment's that weak. It's just probably more of a norm to what we see historically. But it is more difficult, right? It takes time, but people don't realize that, because in the last 3 years, it was like, if I wanted to go find a job, within a week, I had 10 people offering me a job, no matter what I did. And now it might take you weeks and months to find a job, which is kind of normal historically for a professional to find a job. We always tell like executives, like if you're a VP and above, it takes anywhere from 9 to 12 months to find a job. Wow. So if you're someone that's making six figures, you have to expect that it's going to take you 6 months to find a job. And that's why I'm always like, hey, before you just like say peace out and quit your job, like you might want to think first, like, hey, I'm going to like grind out a little bit on this job while I find another. Don't think like you're just going to quit a job and find one, unless you're in one of these really hot skill sets, that everybody's looking for, then that might be the case where you can quit and find a job tomorrow. But that's not everybody. That's a very small percentage of people.
And then on that note, from your experience working on the HR side, on the company side, do you have any tips for applicants these days? Because I feel like this is such a timely conversation for everybody right now trying to find jobs. Do you have any tips for people to stand out during the process?
I always like to tell people, you have to be pleasantly aggressive. Like, you have to go after the job. You have to message people. Like I always tell people, like rarely does somebody that applies to a job get the job automatically. Usually it's like, oh, hey, I applied to the job, but also I know somebody that works at the company. And so I called them and asked them to help me. And that person went down to HR and said, hey, my buddy Tim just applied. Can you look at his resume? Like use everything you can. I always talk to like new graduates out of like college. And they're always like, oh, well, I don't want to use my mom or my dad or my grandpa or my aunt or my uncle. No, you use everybody you can. Anyone that is there that can work. Somebody that, that your dad golfed with, or it doesn't matter. Someone your mom goes to, coffee with. Like you use everything you can to get your name to the top of the pile so that you can get yourself out there, then show what you can do. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you get the job. It matters how you perform in that job once you get it. And so you use everything you can from a network standpoint. Now, especially college grads, like they undervalue, like Jada, what college did you go to?
Boston University.
You went to Boston, great university, great alumni base. If you were to go to look for a job, and let's say you're like, look, I live on the East Coast, I want to find a job on the West Coast. The first thing I would tell you is like, you go on LinkedIn and you go find every Boston U grad in the West Coast of the city you want to be in, and you just connect with them. And you just tell them, hey, I'm looking for a job out here. Our alumni, love to help each other. And like, we just discount that so much. Especially in the company, if there's a certain company, you want to go to work for Amazon, there's probably 2,000 people from Boston U working at Amazon, right? So you connect with every one of those and hope that they're going to connect a dot for you that's going to get you that job. I mean, it's kind of good old-fashioned network in a modern way. It's like using digital tools to network.
Well, that was going to be my question for you too, because you are an advocate for using the data and the technology for companies to hire, but then you're also agreeing with the notion you have to reach out to people, email, look for references. So how do you balance between the two from someone coming from your expertise?
It's interesting because I tell people how to get a job, and then companies, I'm like, hey, you should be really using the technology, because I do think like how I tell somebody to go get a job is inherently, or could be inherently biased, right? It could be like, hey, you just used your dad and you got the job and that's nepotism and blah, blah, blah. Yep. You know what? But again, if you need to get a job, you get a job. I don't care how you do it. Now, as a company, do I espouse that? Well, no, because I know my hiring managers, tend to have unconscious bias. And so I go, look, I want to use technology to make sure I have a really inclusive process and I get everybody to the table. And so again, we have to battle between those two things. And so it is difficult. And I think like the technology is going to make it more difficult. And I always tell people, like, I think the closest we'll get to be biased free hiring is probably through AI, right? I know my AI doesn't care that you went to Boston U. Whereas if I have a hiring manager that also went there, they're going to care. They're going to know how hard it was to get in. They're going to know how hard it was to graduate. And they're going to, kind of go, oh my gosh, I know what she went through, and immediately have this connection, where AI would be going, whether it was BC or BU, I don't care. It's still two good programs, right?
And we've been talking a lot today about the job market, and unconventional jobs are becoming more frequent. And you actually recently posted on LinkedIn about Gen Z's salary expectations. And you
Yeah.
seem to have some thoughts on that, and how people are looking for different ways to make money. And with influencers and social media, it kind of changes people's perception. So can you expand on why you posted that? You didn't really explain your thoughts so much, so thought we'd ask you when we have you on the hot seat.
Yeah, I can't remember where the chart came from, but basically it was showing by generation the expectation versus reality of what the average salary is, right? And um, all the expectations were out of whack. Gen Z's was way, like 3 times more than any other generation. Part of that is lack of experience in the job market, right? So they don't really know, but they're very attuned to social media. And so they see people going, oh, I'm making $100,000 a month, with my YouTube channel. Awesome. That's a 0.0001% of that population, right? But because it's so out there that they believe like, oh my gosh, this is obtainable and I should be making, $500,000 a year. It was interesting because I think like the number for them considering themselves wealthy was a complete like it was like $9 million they had to have, right, for their kind of overall net to become like wealthy. And I think most people would go, I think if you had 5 million or 3 million, you would probably be considered wealthy. In fact, the stats would show that you're probably wealthy. Now, someone might go, wait a minute, that's not wealthy in New York or San Francisco. Cool. But like in the most of the world, that's pretty wealthy. And so I do think that part of that is like, it's just a misalignment with reality. Like, again, can you make that much money? Sure. Should you be thinking, and should we allow a generation to think that $500,000 is the norm salary, right? And when you have people out there who are software engineers making 85, 90,000 in the middle of, the Midwest, like I don't think it's good. I don't think it's healthy. I think it hurts them as an employee, knowing that the vast majority of them are going to have to go out there and actually be a W-2 employee. They're not going to be able to, everybody can't be an influencer. If everyone's an influencer, guess what? No one is an influencer.
And yeah, I think that's more of to just the economy and the state of the world. Back in my day, I'm 30, but when I was younger, making $100,000 was rich. Like that was a good salary. And now you can't afford to live in major cities on $100,000. So I think that could be part of it, right? Just kind of the state of the world, the economy, how expensive everything's gotten. Do you think that also plays in a part to maybe them thinking we need more than what other generations think we need?
I do, but I also think 90% of the US population makes under $100,000, right? So again, it's one of those like disconnects where we go, 100,000 isn't that much anymore. Yeah, it is. It's still a lot. You
Well,
can
I think
still
our
live
company
really
needs
good.
to
Now,
be
again,
paying us more then.
no, but if you're living in New York paying $5,000 a month for an apartment, yeah, guess what? 100,000 isn't that much, but you're making a choice to live in New York and pay 5,000 a month for an apartment, right? So it's like, so that's the difficult piece, is that you still have the vast majority of the US population that doesn't make six figures. And so there's that like, it's just a disconnect between employee and reality that I think somehow down the road, it's just going to be a wake up call, right? It doesn't matter what I say. One day they're going to wake up and they're like, oh crap, I have to get a job, and someone's going to offer them 75,000, and they're going to be like, oh my God, 75,000. There's a lot of people that would probably, move across the country to make $75,000.
And you were talking a little bit before about ghost jobs, but there is this phenomenon too where either recruiters or hiring managers after interviews are ghosting candidates and not getting back to them saying we didn't hire or
Yeah.
we hired someone else. In your opinion of seeing the changes over the years, why do you think that is? Is it just too much that people can't respond to everyone? Because in my opinion, it's kind of not nice to not hear back when you went through maybe 3 or 4 rounds of interviews.
I think those employers are awful. I think they're awful people. No, I think they're awful people and they should be publicly shamed every chance we get. Again, I understand from a capacity standpoint that everybody that applies isn't going to get a personal call from me saying, "Hey, you applied, you had no like background for this job at all, but you applied, so I have to call you and tell you, that's not going to happen." But I do think as an employer, if you have somebody that actually takes their time, invests their time, comes to you, talks to you, does an interview, whether that's on video or in person or whatever that might be, you should be able to give them feedback. We're not interviewing that many people that we can't give feedback to people who've invested that time back. And sometimes we're seeing these employers who are like, oh, well, we have a 5 interview process. And you get to the 5th interview and they go, oh, we selected Jada instead and sorry. And that's it. And you're like, wait a minute. I just gave you days and hours and all this stuff, and like, I deserve a little bit more than that. And so again, I put that on the employer. That's just a bad employer. Now, again, the employers will go, well, Tim, we schedule interviews and 20% of the time the person never shows up. Also, those are awful people. if they don't,
I've had interviewers not show up to
right?
interviews, so.
And so both sides are bad that do that. And you're like, look, if somebody does that, then they're bad and that they're telling you who they are. Maybe you shouldn't, go work for them, or maybe you shouldn't hire them as an employee. We've joked for years that there should be a website for both sides, right? That, like Black Book HR, where it's like one side is candidates that have that ghosted on an interview or start date. And on the other side are, companies and hiring managers that ghosted you on interviews or whatever that might be. And so people can just put it out there and say, look, this is what happened. Of course, legally, and no one's going to do that. But
and unfortunately, it seems like it's most companies nowadays, at least from just my friend group, it's happening to a lot of people.
And there's part of this where we raised an entire generation of HR people saying, hey, and this is kind of legal teams going, don't ever give feedback, because if you do, you might say something to somebody and then they would sue us. But what the legal team was saying was like, don't tell Jada you didn't hire because she's female. What idiot's going to do that, really? Like, hey, look, we liked you, but we like the men better. Like, that's just not going to happen. And so I think part of that is like we're scared to give feedback because we're in this kind of society where we think we could get sued. Well, you can't. You can get sued for anything. But if you actually give really, kind of risk-free feedback that's correct, could somebody sue you? Sure. Are you going to be able to kind of beat that? You sure are. Like, it's just not going to be that risky, right? If I go and say, hey, Jada, you interviewed with us and here's exactly, what we thought and here's what we think you could do better because we value you as somebody who applied and cares about our company. And we wish, even though you're not going to get this job, maybe there's another job that's going to open up a week from now, a month from now that we would love to have you be a part of. That's a way better way to handle a candidate than what we're doing right now.
At least just say you went in a different direction. That's all we need, right?
Right.
So we started the conversation talking about AI. So now to wrap up our conversation today, what do you think the HR world or the technology world will look like in the next 5 to 10 years? You think it's all AI based? What do you think?
It's funny because I get asked all the time, like, how is this going to change HR? How is this going to change talent? It's going to change every single function. It's going to change finance and sales, and everything we do is going to change. So, I can't even imagine 10 years from now. I have a hard time imagining 2 years from now, because I think like the amount of like AI agents that are being built into our system, doing the work that we can do and being able to do it 24/7. I've seen a lot of like, AI that is going to start screening, like having these interviews, right? Where instead of you talking to a real person, you're going to talk to an AI robot. And that robot sounds like a normal person, sounds like somebody who loves the company. They sound like they're really interested in talking to you. I mean, it's so scary good that it's like, hey, imagine the best interview you ever had. And now imagine that happening every single time you interview. This is what AI is going to have the chance to do. And so the question is always then, okay, well, if AI is doing that, then what am I going to do? And I think, that becomes the bigger question. To me, that's the question we have to answer as professionals of every function, going, okay, what are we going to do if AI takes away 75% of the daily work that we do? How am I going to fill that capacity? What am I actually going to do? And we see CEOs even going, hey, maybe we should start talking about a 4-day week. Like, like that's just legitimate. If AI is going to take away that much stuff, maybe we should just go to 4 days and pay people the same salary and benefits for 4 days and give them 3 days, kind of more quality of life. I do think it behooves everybody to, like, if you have a chance to be in office and be around real people, go to the office. And I'm not saying that as like some Gen Xer that just thinks everyone should be in the office. Like I get people want to stay at home and be remote. What I'm telling you is that the more you're around other people, you're going to be able to answer that question. What are we doing next? Versus working from home and being on a Zoom call. Like it's just going to be more difficult to kind of really kind of solve that problem.
Yeah, I think there's a good balance there of partial remote, partial in
Yeah,
person. But I think we'll have to redo this conversation in what you said, 2 years, and see if your theories were right of what you were looking on there. But I
definitely.
really appreciate you joining us today, Tim. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And for everybody watching, thank you for joining us today. You could catch us every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So if you're hungry for other Purple Acorn shows, make sure you go to purpleacornnetwork.com and Purple Acorn on LinkedIn. See you next time.